Good Thursday morning, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for August the 30th. Today, we are reading together Psalm 105. Psalm 105. Thanks so much for being patient with me and let me take some extra time to get this daily Bible reading video done. Had some other stuff going on past couple of days that needed my attention to get those done at ASAP. So thankfully, y'all are pretty generous with me and letting me let me adjust the schedule every now and then. So thank you so much, and I'm excited to read along in this text today with you. The 105th Psalm has been given the title in my Bible, God's Faithfulness to His People. It is a historical psalm, which we've already seen one of those in Psalm 78, and we're going to see another one in our reading tomorrow in Psalm 106. And these two psalms are let's just say a splitting and an unpacking of Psalm 78. Psalm 78 focuses on Yahweh's goodness and Israel's unfaithfulness, whereas these two Psalms focus each on one of those two aspects of Psalm 78. Here today, we're going to see Yahweh's faithfulness being the focus, and tomorrow, as we read Psalm 106, we're going to see Israel's unfaithfulness to God being the focus. Again, history, these historical Psalms are not just purely a retelling of facts, but they are the retelling of facts in order to make a point, in order to teach. And certainly here, what we're going to see in Psalm 105 is just how good God is to Israel and how certain it is that God's promises that he makes will come true. So let's focus on that here in Psalm 105 today. Let me get the text up on the screen. And let's read together here Psalm 105, beginning in verse number 1. Psalm 105 in verse number 1. Give thanks to Yahweh. Call on his name. Proclaim his deeds among the peoples. Sing to him. Sing praise to him. Tell about all his wondrous works. Boast in his holy name. Let the hearts of those who seek Yahweh rejoice. Seek Yahweh and his strength. Seek his face always. Remember the wondrous works he has done, his wonders and the judgment he has pronounced. You offspring of Abraham, his servant, Jacob's descendants, his chosen ones. He is Yahweh, our God. His judgments govern the whole earth. He remembers his covenant forever, the promise he ordained for 1,000 generations, the covenant he made with Abraham, swore to Isaac, and confirmed to Jacob as a decree, and to Israel as a permanent covenant. I will give the land of Canaan to you as your inherited portion. When they were few in number, very few indeed, and resident aliens in Canaan, wandering from nation to nation and from one kingdom to another, he allowed no one to oppress them. He rebuked kings on their behalf. Do not touch my appointed ones or harm my prophets. He called down famine against the land and destroyed the entire food supply. He had sent a man ahead of them, Joseph, who was sold as a slave. They hurt his feet with shackles. His neck was put in an iron collar until the time his prediction came true. The word of Yahweh tested him. The king sent for him and released him. The ruler of peoples set him free. He made him master of his household, ruling over all his possessions, binding his officers at will and instructing his elders. Then Israel went to Egypt. Jacob lived as an alien in the land of Ham. Yahweh made his people very fruitful. He made them more numerous than their foes, whose hearts he turned to hate his people and to deal deceptively with his servants. He sent Moses his servants and Aaron whom he had chosen. They performed his miraculous signs among them and wonders in the land of Ham. He sent darkness, and it became dark. For did they not defy his commands? He turned their water into blood and caused their fish to die. Their land was overrun with frogs, even in their royal chambers. He spoke, and insects came, gnats through their country. He gave them hail for rain and lightning throughout their land. He struck their vines and fig trees and shattered the trees of their territory. He spoke, and locusts came, young locusts without number. They devoured all the vegetation in their land and consumed the produce of their land. He struck the firstborn in their lands, all their first progeny. Then he brought Israel out with silver and gold, and no one among his tribes stumbled. Egypt was glad when they left, for the dread of Israel had fallen on them. He spread a cloud as a covering, and gave a fire to light up the night. They asked, and he brought quail, and satisfied them with bread from heaven. He opened a rock, and water gushed out. It flowed like a stream in the desert, for he remembered his holy promise to Abraham his servant. He brought out his people with rejoicing, his chosen ones with shouts of joy. He gave them the lands of the nations, and they inherited what other peoples had worked for. All this happened so that they might keep his statutes and obey his instructions. Hallelujah. Psalm number 105. 105. All right, so you saw there at the end the emphasis on the fact that he had remembered his holy promise to Abraham, his servant. And that really is the foundation, the background that this entire psalm is working upon. As we get into the psalm, the first 6 verses, we see that being established. The promises made to Abraham and his family, again, being the foundation of everything we're going to see here. We see in verse 1, give thanks to the Lord, call on his name, proclaim his deeds, sing to him, honor his holy name, seek Yahweh and his strength, seek his face always, and remember. So all of these verbs are actions that need to be taken by those who are the beneficiaries of God's good promises that he made to Abraham. God's goodness seen to Israel in keeping these 3 great promises. Now, of course, those promises have to do with his nation, Abraham's family, which would be a great number, having a land. And then the fact that the family itself would be great, that Abraham would have many descendants, as many as the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore. And then that they would, through all that through the family and nation and land, all the nations of the earth would be blessed. So the psalm focuses on God's goodness, on his faithfulness to Israel. Verses 1 through 6. Verses 7 through 11, we see Yahweh being exalted here. The greatness of God being the focus. He is Yahweh our God. His judgments govern the earth. He remembers his covenant forever. So going back to verse number 6, identifying Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, and then going to verse number 42, we have those connections there. He keeps the covenants forever. The promise he ordained for 1,000 generations. This is just speaking of God's perfect faithfulness forever and for 1,000 generations. In verse number 8, those are basically synonymous terms. Again, the emphasis is the covenant he made with Abraham. He swore it to Isaac. He confirmed it with Jacob. I will give the land of Canaan to you as your inherited portion. And of course, that only comes with having a people. And if we know well the story of Abraham and Sarah, they're old, have no kids, have no prospect of kids, really have no hope for kids until Yahweh enters into the covenant with them, and he ends up producing kids. And not only do they have numerous descendants, but they have this great land. Now, speaking of that, verse number 12, they were few in number, very few indeed. Not just in the beginning, whenever it came to Abraham and Sarah, but once we get into this portion about their time in Egypt, think about those who went down to Egypt are very few in number. Only about 70 went down there, and they grew into this great land. They were beforehand, there was just a few of them. They were aliens, they were wanderers. But even with this small number, and even with this really non-impressive outlook, whenever other people looked at the family of Abraham, they weren't really impressed by them. There was nothing that was significant about them. Even with that, we see God took care of them. He would not allow anybody to oppress them. Verse 14, he rebuked the kings on their behalf. Don't touch my anointed ones or my prophets. Verse 15. So he protected them, even though they're small, even though they're insignificant, even though they're not very impressive, God protected them. Well, one of the ways he did that is whenever he sent the famine that Joseph predicted while he was in Egypt. This forced Joseph's family, his father Jacob, and the rest of the descendants to go down into Egypt. And there we see Joseph's ordeal being addressed, where he goes down there as a slave, and he's falsely accused, and he's imprisoned. But then we see that he ends up being exalted into a specific into a very good position within the land of Egypt. And this allows him then to be able to bless his family, to allow them to prosper and to grow strong and to be very fruitful, as we see in verse number 24. They're very fruitful people. He made them more numerous than their foes. And in fact, the people within Egypt and the Pharaoh at that time began to loathe the children of Israel because they were so strong, and he feared them and feared that they might join with some attacking nations and end up wiping Egypt out. So there ended up being a morphing from where the leader in Egypt appreciated Joseph and his family and blessed them to where they're now being persecuted. So what does God do? Again, God's goodness and faithfulness is seen in the fact that he ends up sending Moses, and not just Moses, but also Aaron, to go and to perform miraculous signs, to perform wonders in the land of Ham. He sent darkness upon the land. We see the plagues being described in verses 28 through 36. He sent darkness. He turned the water into blood, the frogs, the insects and gnats, the hail. Let's see here. The locusts come, the striking of the firstborn. All of these miraculous signs that were carried out by Moses and Aaron, and as they were endowed by power from God, allowed them to be able to go out of Egypt. And how were they able to go out? They were able to go out like victors, having gold and silver among them. They were sustained throughout the entirety of this ordeal. But as for Egypt, Egypt was finally glad to see them go. Why? Because they were terrified. They were terrified of the Israelite people. They were terrified of their God. And what does God do at this point? Well, God goes, and I really appreciate this really cool observation by Tommy Peeler, as I was listening to him talk about this text. Really cool observation of the reversals that we see here within these few verses 39 through 43, the reversal of things that we've already seen, where God gave them cloud as a covering and gave them fire to light up the night, the reversal of darkness. He brought them quail and satisfied them with bread from heaven, the reversal of the plague, the reversal of the hail, the reversal of the locusts. He opened a rock and water gushed out, the reversal of the water to blood. He remembered his holy promise to Abraham, his servants, and he brought his people out with rejoicing, his chosen ones with shout of joy. Verse 43 is a reversal of verse 38. Egypt was in dread, but here Israel is rejoicing for how good God has been to them. And what does this result in finally? Once we get through the wilderness, once we get through the wandering, we come to the conquest, and the people are able to take the land. He, Yahweh, gave them the lands of the nations, and they inherited what other peoples had worked for. God's promise of the land, God's promise of the great nation had come to pass. God made the promise. God fulfilled the promise. And all of this happened in verse 45 so that they might keep his statutes and obey his instructions. Praise Yahweh for his goodness, for his faithfulness, for his promises never fail. That is the wonderful, encouraging, and powerful message of Psalm 105. And oh, how sad it is that we're going to get back again together tomorrow and read about the unfortunate unfaithfulness of the people. Again, verse 45, all this happened so they might keep his statutes and obey his instructions. But unfortunately, we're going to see where we see the goodness and the faithfulness of Yahweh, we're going to see the evil and the wickedness and lack of faithfulness from the people moving forward. If you have any questions or comments about Psalm 105, please feel free to leave that in the comment section below. Again, thanks for your patience. Again, a little off schedule this week, but I do hope you'll be back again tomorrow as we read together from Psalm 106, Israel's unfaithfulness to God. Take care and God bless.